Hello, welcome to the Do Not Scratch Your Eyes podcast. I'm Justin.
I'm not Carl, I'm Peter.
And joining us for our opposition view is Nathan from Rob Ryan Red podcast. Oh, I got it right. Hello, how are you, Nathan?
I'm doing well. Well done. You got it right. You didn't trip over all the R's. I mean, we deliberately called the podcast that just to trip up opposition podcasters. So it was for this exact moment that I, and Rich, who I did the podcast with, named it Rob Ryan Red.
Your evil plan has come to fruition, and I think it's very important. Speaking of evil plans, I'm sure Wrexham get a great deal of crap about these two gentlemen, obviously, Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds. However, you're not going to get that today, and let me explain why. We would be throwing basically large stones around in a glass house because, for anybody who doesn't remember, in the 1970s, a certain well-known superstar, Elton John, decided to buy his club, and basically he combined with another twosome. This time it was Graham Taylor, and anybody who read the book Watford Forever, one of the things it said how Graham Taylor and Elton John saved a football club, a town, and each other, which kind of I would suggest resonates. It's a twosome. It's there. It's very good. Now, Graham Taylor in his first era took us up to the top flight, but Wrexham played a major part in it, and I don't expect any Wrexham fan to know about it, because for you it would have been a rudimentary 2-0 away defeat. But this was the game where Watford got to the top flight for the first time, and it is writ large and in legend. And I've got the programme on the screen with Jerry Armstrong, Steve Sims, Wrexham on a Tuesday night. It ended up 2-0 with Ross Jenkins getting 2 goals. Ross Jenkins is definitely the best ever forward. Well, watch that put the cat amongst the pigeons. Some great names though for Wrexham in the team there. A young Eddie Nedvetsky, who went on and played for Chelsea. Joey Jones, who was obviously at Liverpool, but was better known surely at Wrexham, and Dixie McNeil. I remember Dixie McNeil primarily because I got him mixed up with Dixie Dean quite a lot, even though they were absolutely in many different decades and teams and years apart. Never mind.
You're missing something very important there, Peter.
What am I missing?
Levi jeans for $9.99? That seems very reasonable.
Well, cheap shirts, $3.99.
I mean, 99p for a plain T-shirt. Those were the days. Anyway, carry on.
Well, not saying we're easily distracted, but we're easily distracted. So anyway, we had Graham Taylor. There it was. When you guys, lifted the Vanarama Trophy and got back into the league, which was, I mean, everybody saw it. There was another little headline which brings everything together, I think, in a very nice way. Elton John rang Ryan Reynolds and just said, congratulations, but also for the fact that he knew that they were enjoying themselves. So I'm sure you get questions about it all the time, but just give us a brief idea about the difference and the transformation that they've made from the town, obviously in the club.
I think the Wrexham were fan-owned after, previously having an unscrupulous owner that is, not unique to Wrexham. There have been many, unfortunately, that have gone in and ruined many a football club. I wish we were, maybe an isolated case. That is not the case. They will continue to be bad owners in sport. That is just the nature of the beast. Some people with far too much money and not the best of intentions. So we had one of those who I don't name on our podcast, not anyone else's. Fans take on the club, turn the club around. We are going for it in the National League. We end up getting more than 90 points. We lose out to Jamie Vardy's Fleetwood on the National League title. We then go into the playoffs and we flop in the playoffs. Previously got to Wembley. We lost to Newport in the playoff final. I can't tell you how devastating that was. And we've had seasons where we've really struggled, and our transfer committee and our transfer budget we used to have this thing called Build the Budget, where people would shake buckets outside the ground before every game, and at the end of the season, what you've raised in the buckets would be your transfer budget for the following summer, right? So you can imagine how pocket money and things wouldn't go too far to getting you the best striker in the division, and so the cycle repeats and repeats. I think there was a smidge of sadness when it kind of dawned on everyone that we just weren't going to do it. We weren't going to get back into the league being fan owned. Would that be the most poetic way to do it and the best way? Probably. But I was reading a story this week about Exeter City and the financial peril they're in, right? And it's that bittersweet thing of we've done so well fan owned, but actually is private ownership kind of the devil we need to know if you want to be the very, very best. And I daren't even use the word devil because we've got 2 really fun. I would say this, I know, but there's two phenomenal blokes, and I would actually say when we learned of Ryan Reynolds, we learned of Rob McElhenney, who's now actually changed his name officially just to Rob Mack. He's ditched McElhenney now officially.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Because he said that everyone called him Rob Mack, so it just didn't make. He just felt like it didn't make sense. I thought that was a touch silly, but that kind of sums them two up. If that's about as silly as
That's
it's
the
going to
way to
get,
do it.
I can live with that. For me, when I found out it was those two, specifically Reynolds, but both of them, I was actually quite relaxed because they have a lot to lose. Not financially, but they have a lot to lose
Reputationally.
reputationally, and that gave me a lot of sort of belief that they were in it for good reasons. Because why do these two Hollywood actors need to come in and be unscrupulous at a Welsh team? There's no one is making you do that. You don't need to turn up at Maidenhead in the midweek and stand on the terrace. You have a
Which he
very
did.
nice house in Beverly Hills. They did do that.
Yeah.
You don't have to have people calling you all sorts of obscenities in, just outside of London and Maidenhead. You don't need that. You can just go and live your life in Beverly Hills or LA or Inglewood, wherever they live, and have the
I've
time of your
worked.
life.
I have
Yeah.
worked in Maidenhead, and I can confirm that this is something that goes on a daily basis. The swearing, definitely.
Yes, yes. I've been many times, too many times actually. But in a weird way, I was chatting to a friend of mine recently. There is a degree of fun nostalgia when you look back to the National League days. I was just doing another podcast where I was talking about a story where we once played Ebbsfleet. They didn't warm up, and they absolutely battered us. They were having a dispute with the owner about payment. They didn't warm up. We warmed up. It was the scene where half of the pitch is empty. We're obviously warming up, and we got absolutely outplayed. You would not believe. That was one of the most humbling games I've ever been to, and yeah, we've had some stinkers over the years. I remember I went to Eastleigh. Graham Stack, the former Arsenal goalkeeper,
Yes.
was doing a
Yes.
very obscene gesture, running right along the away end, letting us know that he didn't really like us very much after a 1-1 draw at Eastleigh. So, great times. This was kind of pre Rob and Ryan, a lot of this, but they've come
Well,
in, and you have to say they've backed up exactly what they said. People laughed at them. They gave that. I was at that talk when they stood in the Mold Road stand at the racecourse and said, "Why can we not dream of going to the Premier League?" And there were a lot of TV cameras there and a lot of reporters and people sniggering and laughing a little bit. And they weren't laughing when they said that. They firmly believed it. And look, we're in the Championship. We're 3 points off the playoffs, and no one's laughing now. So I think huge, huge, huge amounts of credit go to them too.
Well, Graham Stack, once our goalkeeper coach, I can confirm that if he were to be a resident of Maidenhead, he would fit right in with the swearing. That's absolutely fine. Look, I think what you've done, and I appreciate that people will look at the TV money and the documentary and all of that sort of stuff. But what it seems to have done for the town is from an identity point of view, let alone a commercial point of view, and kind of a pride point of view as much as anything as well, because I appreciate exactly what you're saying about you look back on those heady days of the National League, but those are almost like campaign medals that you wear with pride because you were there, because you suffered it, and you're there and you're real. It's not the fault of younger fans that they'll come along in the good time. I went to my first game on the day when these two gentlemen lifted the fourth division a title for Watford, and the next season we went up from the third division. Yeah, we stayed in and around the Championship for 3 seasons before we went up. However, what you've done is the same thing from a season, kind of a division below. And it's no less of an achievement. And I know people will point to the money, etc. But here is a question for you, which I don't know if you've been asked before. But obviously, whilst all of the concentrated media focus, which you can understand why it's there, it's absolutely understandable, from from on Ryan Reynolds and the newly named Rob Mack. We like that very much indeed. Does Phil Parkinson get enough credit for what he's done? Because if you look at Phil Parkinson, he's done the equivalent of what Graham Taylor did. Yes, we had a commercial advantage. It wasn't so much, but football was very different then. But Graham Taylor came in and took us up 3 divisions up into the top flight. Phil Parkinson has come in and taken you up 3 divisions to the Championship and could go yet one stage further again. Does he get the credit he deserves on a national and on a football level? I'm sure he does, obviously, at the racecourse. But is he appreciated as much as he should be?
No, I think Phil Parkinson could win the Champions League, and people would say, "Well, I could have done that with the money." I think this thing about Phil Parkinson has just done exactly what he had to do with the money spent. I think is far too simplistic. Wrexham didn't invent money, or did they aren't sort of doing something new. Like other teams have had
Yeah,
money along the way and have stalled and have stumbled. At League One um, the way I look at it, Wrexham spent heavily on a League One caliber squad and won the National League in record-breaking fashion. The amount of points, that was one of the great title wins, I think. And whether you want to say, well, that's level five, doesn't really matter. Wrexham had been in the National League for 15 years, so I can tell you, it was very, very enjoyable and very, very impressive with the manner, even with the money spent on the squad. And then League Two, I think League Two is probably the easiest league to get out of. I don't think there's a great deal
yeah,
of quality in there year in, year out. And you've
that's
got the
interesting.
three automatics. That might change if the National League get their three up, three down campaign going. But League Two, I think, we've seen plenty of teams do the double bubble there. But to get out of League One, when effectively League One last year, there was one promotion spot available. Birmingham were always going to run away from it. And that's not, again, me knocking it. That was Wrexham in the National League,
Yeah,
basically. But Birmingham were always going to run away with that title. So everyone made peace with that. Clubs like Bolton, clubs like Barnsley, clubs like Huddersfield, Lincoln were very well drilled the year before under Scabala. Like there were a lot of good teams there, and Wrexham, they just hadn't kind of financially doped their way through League One. It just isn't right. What Phil Parkinson built was maybe not the most attractive on the eye, but an incredibly efficient side. I was at a Northern football writers' dinner where he gave a speech. All the managers were there that had been promoted. So Darren Moore was there with Port Vale and Graham Alexander with Bradford, etc. And Phil Parkinson, he did actually call out podcasters in that speech. I don't know whether he saw me sort of sat 30 feet away, but he did specifically call out podcasters. But aside from that, he was talking about League One and how from the outside, a lot of people felt that it was going a lot worse than what he could see internally, and he sort of saw the fruits of that by the end. But yeah, I don't think he does, because I don't think people want to give Phil Parkinson as a manager. I think people have made up their mind on what he is. So I feel like no matter what he does now, most fans have got an idea of Phil Parkinson football. And I think that generally with just managers in general, but like people get an opinion of them, and sort of that's it then. It's like, well, there isn't a lot of room for I was wrong about that, or actually let's give him his flowers. And if I go by social media, that's not a place where positivity lives for too long. So we're giving Phil Parkinson his flowers. I think people should give him more, but I'm sure he's
hmm
not losing any sleep over it either.
No, you're right. There's always an army of criticism, but there's always a tsunami of silence when they're corrected, which is, a shame. Look, we've done that. I just wanted to say, look, because we've said it all season to various people on the opposition view, and the last one we did was Sheffield Wednesday, and they actually called out and said, when we went there, Wrexham put on their away shirt as a special because the colours matched the put it on for 20 quid, and all the revenue went to them. They didn't give it to the club; they gave it to the supporters trust. Look, look, class isn't what people say about you; it's the actions that you take, and that seemed classy. So there we go. Well, look, we're coming up to the racecourse, or what is it? What is it in Welsh? I can never get my. Is it
The
Stop Russ?
Kairas, yes, the Kairas, yeah.
But let's have a quick look at your season, because as you say, you've come up and you've come on and come through. The home record is really pretty good. Kind of average points per game, 1.6. Normally you'd look at that and go, yeah, okay, that's quite tidy. But obviously this is your first season back in, as you say, in the second tier. Away record is again slightly lower. This is kind of normal sort of things we see. One thing that I did notice in there, and I wouldn't normally put this in with the spectators, but one of the things that obviously has been kind of improved and looked in is the stadium itself. The cop that they've kind of cleared and are built, is that currently being built on? Is that going to allow you to grow yet further?
Yeah, I mean, they just broke ground on that in the past week. So shovel finally in the ground. I can't tell you how excited everyone was to see a shovel go into some soil. That was the Christmas present we've all been waiting for. Because it had taken quite a while. It was meant to
Yes,
be
it
done
has.
by the end of this season. That quickly got revised, and they designed one version. We all got very giddy about that artist impression, and then CEO comes in. Let's get a different architect, new design all over again, and then you're battling with the council over parking and phosphates and all these things that I didn't even know what a phosphate was actually a couple of years ago, and now I could probably tell you all you need to know about phosphates. So slowly but surely we're going to get there, and that will take the capacity to about 18,000. I've been
Okay.
to Vicarage Road many times. I've very much enjoyed. I think my last trip there was, I want to say, the season opener against Aston Villa when Ismail Assar might have been in a
Oh,
Watford
yes.
shirt. That was when I was working down in London as a reporter. So I had a very good time. That's very good atmosphere at Vicarage Road. A good away in from what I can remember.
Yeah. Yeah, because it was
But
the
so
first game back after COVID.
so I was exactly first game back after COVID, and I always kind of look at stadiums and think, what do Wrexham actually need? Because Michael Williamson, the CEO, he's shooting for 32,000 when all is said and done. That's what he wants. So 18 with the cop, and then you start renovating elsewhere. We went to Ipswich recently, and they read out the attendance as 29,000, and I thought that was huge. I thought that was probably too much for
Yeah.
Wrexham on a week to week basis. So you guys might have to remind me what Vicarage Road is, but I think there is a level where I think maybe 22 to 25 might be a really good sweet spot for Wrexham, and above that, I think I'm not sure in the long run.
I mean,
Personally, I'm not sure.
That's about where we
the
are, isn't it? 22 to
we're
25.
we're 22, but because of some things in the Vicarage Road end, that's been now been brought down to it's 20 something. So there, it doesn't matter even if we look sold out, there are still gaps, because of certificates. I must confess, I stopped listening at that particular point because it became really dull in that meeting. But it's yeah, I mean, I think I love the Vicarage Road Stadium because it can rock with the 20,000 people in there, and you need to be in the Premier League in order to ensure that you're going to fill a bigger stadium. There's been talk about us going to 30,000, but we'd all be rattling around it like Coventry are when they're not top of the Championship. For the last 5 seasons, or in fairness, they were quite nomadic and what have you. But when they got back in there on occasions, they were. Kind of 15,000 in a 30,000 stadium does not look good. But there we go. Let's get back to the opposition view and your games there. You're on a decent sort of run at this moment in time because it's 7 games unbeaten, 3 wins, 4 draws, but certainly don't feel out of place at all where you're currently residing in the Championship. And like a lot of people, or a lot of teams rather, we could throw a blanket over us all, which if the blanket was about 6 points wide, it fills up most of the Championship, it feels like. But an unbeaten run against some notably traditional big names in there, including Cov, as well. So fair play. How has it felt in terms of the recent form and holding your own in the Championship?
Yeah, I mean, what, 9 games unbeaten now? I think it is since that Stoke defeat. That was a really grim day, that one. But 9 games unbeaten, I think that's the best unbeaten run in the top 4 leagues. So nobody is more kind of defensively sound right now than Wrexham are. I just think we're in every single game. That Coventry game was a real springboard for us, and we're one of 2 teams to beat Coventry in the league this season, and we really did. Perfect hat trick for Kiefer Moore, hat trick of assists that night for Josh Windass. There are some games in there where you might think, that's not going to age brilliantly, like a point away at Pompey. But I think a lot of them are going to age quite well. A point away at Ipswich, I think they'll be really good. Went and beat Oxford at home. They're difficult to break down. That's a good result. Preston, a point there, just gone. I think that's a
Yep.
pretty solid result, really. I mean, they're a good team as well. We've got Hull coming midweek, so really, I just keep saying, and we've said this on our podcast to Rich, that we just need to be close. We just need to be within striking distance of the playoffs, because I think that might tempt the owners to just have a bit of a splash. We just need a little bit more up front, I think. Defensively, we're looking really good. Dom Hyam from Blackburn's been an
Yeah.
incredible signing. Played every minute in the Championship last season for Blackburn's been great for us. Max Kluwert's come right through the ranks with us. I think he's one of the best young players in the Championship. No doubt Premier League clubs are looking at him. The goalkeeper, he's superb. Martha Okonkwo was arguably man of the match. Cleworth and Hyam are great. Dan Scarr, we thought he was done for coming into the Championship. He's really stepped up. Ben Sheaf there, number 18. We've lost
Yep.
once in the league when he started. So since he's joined the club, he's only lost once as a starter. George Dobson's been arguably one of our Player of the Year candidates so far. James McLean looked like he was finished, really dropped out and went on
Yeah.
various podcasts and said how he wasn't enjoying it. He's been phenomenal in the past 3 or 4 games. And then obviously you've got Kiefer Moore, who's got 8 goals, league top scorers on 10. So it's going well for him. And the likes of Broadhead are just ticking along and not yet hit their best form. So, on paper, I
Yeah.
think you look at that, there's a lot of players there that are playing at a good level or are playing good enough that they can absolutely frustrate other teams. And definitely on the road, that's a very defensive side there. And I would say that on the road, that's a very, very difficult group to break down.
Yeah. Would you expect it to be the same shape? I mean, we're looking at a 3-5-2 in that particular design, but we have known that transfer market can go awry with these particular things. How would you expect, kind of what shape would you expect Wrexham to face up to Watford on the Saturday?
I mean, if you asked me about if you asked me about 91 of the 92 teams in the top 4, I'd say maybe transfer market could go right, but Wrexham will play a back 3 from the very start of Phil Parkinson's reign till the very, very end. No matter if Wrexham are, losing it horrendously and we're in some relegation scrap, he will be playing a back 3. So that will absolutely be the back 3, although I would say
Mhm.
that it will be
Yep.
Dan Scarr in the middle, it'll be Dom Hyam as the left centre back, and Max plays as the right centre back.
Right.
The question mark, I guess, would be on the wing backs. It'll definitely be McLean again, I would have thought. I think Ryan Longman would be in contention to play down the right. That would be a potential one that you could come up against. And
Okay.
I think that Matty James or Lewis O'Brien, they're both options that I think could come in for Thomason and Dobson. Sheaf will start. I think it'll probably be Sheaf, Dobson, and Matty James, actually. I think Matty James might start against Watford. And the front 2, I'm actually just for purpose of mixing it up, I think it might be Moore and Josh Windass coming up against Watford.
Interesting, interesting. And of course, you will have noted a lot of these names, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to actually not call out Phil Parkinson, but call out what he's done. Because as you say, a lot of people will turn around and go, "Oh well, he's got the backing." Well, you can't blame a manager for having decent owners at all. But this is the number of new, as far as I can see, again according to Transfermarkt, he's kind of assimilated 13 new players into that squad, and others going out and others coming in. And exactly as we said earlier on, the number of managers or teams who come out and said, we need time to gel, all the time. I think all credit to Phil Parkinson to be able to take so many new signings in as you've gone up the league and be able to adapt it on the fly, I think is absolutely immense. I mean, there are also some interesting things in there. Ben Sheaf, highly rated at Coventry, as you say. Hopefully his injury record will pick up. Lewis O'Brien, I thought, was a very, very tidy signing and obviously gives you more competition. Dominic Hyam, I have to say, good old Ian Herbert of 4,000 Holes Blackburn was, he was still spitting about that when we spoke to him early on in the season. But we made him feel better by losing 1-0. It's the kind of thing we do. But obviously, as you say, Nathan Broadhead, Kiefer Moore coming in, a player who a lot of championship teams have looked at and thought, well, we can get a tune out of, and we could really do well. And we've coveted Kiefer Moore at on some occasions. Never quite come across, but he seems to be doing it there. So fair play indeed, sir.
I was just going to say quickly. I was just going to say quickly on that you put that list of players up there,
Yeah,
and
sure.
Danny Ward started the season as our number 1. Ends up getting a not a season-ending injury, but sidelined for months. He lands on his elbow, does a great deal of damage to his elbow. I can't remember the exact injury off the top of my head, but he's out now. Didn't get registered in the squad. Issa
Yeah.
Gabore on loan. Has been brilliant. Was amazing for us. Norwich got 2 assists that day, but he's out for an extended period of time now, sidelined. Liberato Gakache came in like he will be our guy. James McLean will get sort of phased out. He'll be our left wing back. Hasn't been able to stay fit. Little niggles here and there. Connor Cody obviously starts the season as our central centre back before we even had Dom Hyam. He's kind of been brushed aside. Ryan Hardy, our first signing of the summer, he can't really get a look in. Thomason was injured for most of pre-season, didn't really play, and then has now come into his own a bit. O'Brien started the season and has dropped out a little bit of late. Doyle, since he got red carded against Oxford, he hasn't really come back in. Lost his place to Dan Scarr, and struggled to get back in. And Broadhead's been majorly up and down. So I think people are looking, going, right, you've spent X amount, but actually either some of those players aren't even playing,
Yeah.
or you've had to navigate some really, really spiky up and down form.
That's fair enough. Well, Doyle was very, very well rated because he'd been in. He had a couple of championship loans. The last one was at Norwich, I think, if I remember rightly. But very well rated, very highly rated. Also, a number of people when we're looking at Watford, because you will notice that there will be a number of how can I put it, kind of foreign names in there. Often come in and go, why don't we go and buy players from the lower leagues? You've done a lot of that. And pulled them in and pulled them up. So hey, it's one of those. It's one of those. So looking towards, and I think it's time that we absolutely have to apologise here, because we're going to ask you to be involved in something that, oh well, really, let's be honest, it's certainly not Hollywood standard. In any way, shape, or form. It's been ongoing for 4 years, despite public apathy towards it. We're talking, yes, about.
It's the DNSYE Completely Rubbish Prediction League.
No! God, please, no! No!
Yes, it's back. It's back. As you know, podcasts always ask you, what's your prediction? And we looked at it and went, why do you want to know? What are you going to do with it? So we started doing a league and seeing whether or not Justin and indeed our erstwhile colleague Carl could do anything better, and could do better than the EFL. It turned out the answer to that was no. However, at the end of a largely unsuccessful season, the question did become, can they do better than inanimate objects? And the answer was also quite a lot no, although Carl managed to spoon a couple. At this moment, let me show you where things stand, because it got very complicated. We've simplified it a lot. However, as things stand, you will be playing for the EFL, who sit comfortably in mid-table on 13 points. At the top is AFC Postbox, who are on 25 points. And last week, they got 2 which was obviously they predicted the right result and the right score difference in terms of beating Norwich by a goal. Backgammon FC got 1, and the Patreons got 1 because they forecasted a Watford win over Norwich, but they didn't. Obviously, happened. DNSYE and the EFL were unaffected on that. However, I should explain to you, sir, what AFC Postbox that is absolutely marauding through this, what it is based upon. Well, let's go through what everybody else is doing first, and then we'll come to that, because there's been issues. So at this moment in time, the Patreons, who are one of the teams in there, have gone for 4-2 to Watford, and that's from Steve, who lives in Wrexham, is a Watford fan, comes to lots of home games, but has decided to predict 4-2 because the rest of his family have started supporting and enjoying Wrexham. So he's gone 4-2 to Watford. Might like to see the fact that if anything we can do, it cause domestic disturbance. Excellent. Backgammon FC have predicted a 1-1 draw, and AFC Postbox are continuing. Basically, they're now having problems with their Christmas problems. What? People would have seen this start against Sheffield Wednesday, because what AFC Postbox is posties in Margate going around to very, very small post boxes on a particular estate and opening them and counting the letters to predict the score. Don't forget, this is top of the league by some way. This is the most predictive way. However, Christmas has definitely got in the way, because their forecast is now.
Told you. This is what 14, I said was going to happen. I said this was going to happen. But we can ratio that, can't we, as 2-1?
No. We're not doing that. That's the kind of.
Can't we ratio it? There's, just for the audio listeners, there was 14 in the Watford box and 28 in the Wrexham box. So why don't we just ratio that as 2-1?
Well, I'll tell you primarily why we can't ratio it is that their forecast for the Sheffield Wednesday game, which, letting daylight in upon magic, we haven't yet played, was Watford 3. Sheffield Wednesday 19, because that's when this problem began. You can't do that. So no. It's 14-20. We're not mucking about with that.
6 and a bit 1. You can't do that, can you? Did I not say this could happen though? I think I said this about 3 weeks ago. I said when the Christmas postage comes in, there won't just be 2 in one and a poo packet and then 3 in another. I said this is going to go, okay, all right, well, okay. So does that mean that they're not predicting during the seasonal period and they're effectively, hopefully, going to drop down the league a little bit?
No, because they could still get the right wins. They could still get the results. I grant you, unless Wrexham are having a really good day, the score difference isn't possibly likely to happen. And I'm not going to suggest that we're going to score 14 or indeed 28, is
No.
you just demand who's going to score.
Who's
We're
gonna
not
score
doing that.
goals? Yeah,
We're not
no.
doing that. So
No.
and you can't just drop in the word poo packet and expect Nathan to just ignore it. On this estate in Margate, we've had to take rules on this. We're not including basically samples of. Yes, exactly. Those don't count. So there we go. There we go. Wrexham 14, Watford 28. What a score line that's going to be.
Wow.
But we turn to the
Good game.
EFL now, trying to bring this thing back into shore. Sir, what do you think? What do you think the score is likely to be when we come to the racecourse, as I will continue to call it?
I am going to go 2-1 to Wrexham. Defensively, we are very solid with good foundation. Probably were fortunate to keep a clean sheet against Bristol City. Blackburn obviously went and scored. We drew against them. Obviously, we're speaking before the midweek game, so I'm going to assume that everyone remains healthy. But I and also you have a striker that's name I can never pronounce, but I always see it come up on Soccer Saturday, and he always seems to score. So I'm going to say that Wrexham just about edge it 2-1.
We can't pronounce Kieran Gard either, but I think it's Kieran Gow officially, is it not, Peter? And we just call him Kieran Gard or K9.
Well, Rich tried to abbreviate it the other day on the post-match phone-in and called him. He basically described him as Luke 09 because he wears a 9, and he
Luke 09. Yeah,
he just got sent off for Sunderland. I mean, the curse is
Sunderland.
right,
I think he plays for Sunderland. Yeah,
he does. He used to play for us.
So he's sitting there going, he scored 2 today, and everybody's going, what's going on? Never mind. So 2-1 to Wrexham there. Justin, without Carl in tow, it is entirely down to you to decide what the forecast is going to be, and you can't ask yourself who's going to score.
1-0 Wrexham.
Justin is head of optimism.
Peter, when we haven't clean sheets this season, very, very few and far between or non-existent. So Wrexham are going to score. They've got a mean defence. So I could say 3-0 Wrexham if you like, but I thought I'd be a bit more, less negative than that, and I've gone for 1-0. But yeah, we're not going to win this one.
There we go. Well, there we have it. The EFL are predicting a 2-1 win for Wrexham. Justin is going, that's optimistic because Watford aren't going to score. It's going to be a 1-0 straightforward Wrexham home win. Backgammon FC have gone 1-1. The Patreons have gone 4-2. And AFC Postbox, poo packets aside, has gone Watford 28, Wrexham 14, which is a hell of a result.
I knew this would happen. It's fun.
Yeah, well, there we go. But whatever happens, points will be awarded.
Do not scratch your eyes.